There were 2 toothbrushes in the holder. That's the first thing I noticed. One of them was green, mine. The other one, electric blue, wasn't. It was new, brushed, clean, moist at the base. That wasn't the kind of mistake Darla would make. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe near it. I just stared like it would explain itself if I waited long enough. I wanted to believe it was for guests. Maybe one of her friends. Maybe her sister. Except no one stays here. No one ever has. I left the bathroom and walked down the hallway barefoot. I could hear her voice echoing from the living room. Calm, low. Like she was waiting for me to start the storm. She was sitting on the couch, one ankle hooked over the other, scrolling on her phone like we hadn't just crossed the line into a place we couldn't come back from. Next to her was an envelope, thick, sealed. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to it without looking at her. She didn't hesitate. Options. I stood there for a second, not speaking, not reacting, just taking in the ridiculousness of how neatly she packaged the destruction of a marriage into a 6x9 envelope from the corner post office. When I didn't move, she finally looked up. "I'm not going to fight, Ul. I'm tired of pretending. I've met someone. And no, I'm not sorry. I won't lie to make this easier for you." Her voice didn't shake. Mine, however, would have if I had dared to use it. She continued, "You can sign the agreement. Everything stays yours. The house, the money. I'll disappear clean. No court, no drama. Or," she tilted her head slightly like she was posing for a camera that wasn't there, "or you can make this messy. And if you do, I promise you, I won't hold back." There it was. No emotion, just a chess move. An ultimatum disguised as generosity. I didn't sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at her directly. Instead, I looked at the rug, the one we bought in Maine, the one she insisted was too loud until we unrolled it, and she fell in love with how wild it looked under the boring furniture. The same rug she once spilled wine on and cried because it felt like a metaphor. And now it was just a rug again. "Why even tell me?" I finally said. Her answer came instantly. "Because you'd find out, and I'd rather you hear it from me than from," she paused, "a neighbor or his wife or your brother." That last part wasn't a slip. And that's when I realized who the electric blue toothbrush belonged to. I still didn't say a word. I just turned around and went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water with shaking hands, not from rage, but from the sudden clarity that nothing in this house belonged to me anymore, not even the silence. She called after me, not angrily, just a casual reminder. "I need an answer before morning." I stood by the sink until I heard her go upstairs. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table and read the same paragraph in a book 17 times. My eyes didn't register the words. My hands didn't turn the pages. I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere between disbelief and the start of something I never thought I'd feel. Relief, because I didn't need time. I already knew my answer, and it would change everything. I left the house at 5:13 a.m. No suitcase, no wallet, just the shirt I slept in, a pair of jeans, and the creaking floorboard behind me whispering its last goodbye. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it. I left it cracked open the same way she'd left the truth for months. There's something eerie about walking through a neighborhood that still thinks you're married, that still waves at you from their porches like you're both part of the same sitcom. Mr. and Mrs. Robbins, the quiet couple with the nice flower beds and matching bikes. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I was a man who had just realized that the woman he built his life around had been busy drawing blueprints for an exit. I walked to my car, sat in the front seat, didn't start it, just sat there. I must have stared at the glove compartment for 20 minutes before opening it. Inside was a flash drive, black, labeled in her handwriting. Editing wedding project. I knew what it really was. It was the file I wasn't supposed to find. 2 weeks ago, she'd left her laptop open while taking a long call in the kitchen. Out of instinct, I moved to close it, but the video was already playing. There was no wedding footage, no bride, no bouquet, just her and a man I recognized from a holiday dinner, a guy who worked with my brother. I remembered the way he laughed too loud, wore a scarf indoors, and called her Dar like they had some inside joke I wasn't invited to. In the video, they were in a hotel room. The camera was shaky, but the sounds weren't. It was muted in every way that mattered, except one, her face. She was smiling like she hadn't smiled in years, like she was finally alive, like I never existed. That night, I copied the file onto a drive, then deleted the original. I didn't tell her. I didn't confront her. I didn't even cry. But that smile, it stayed with me. Back in the car, I stared at that flash drive until the sun rose, turned the key, and drove away from the life I thought was real. No note, no goodbye, no confrontation, just absence. By 7:45 a.m., I was checked into a small in 2 hours North Run by a retired couple who didn't ask questions. The kind of place with floral curtains, weak coffee, and an honesty jar on the counter. I paid in cash. Didn't leave my name. I didn't want to be found. Around noon, my phone, the backup one she didn't know I kept, started buzzing nonstop. Calls, messages, voicemails from her mother, from my brother, all asking the same thing in different voices. Where are you? The thing is, they didn't really want to know where I was. They wanted to know how I had found out, and more importantly, how I disappeared without making a scene. I listened to one voicemail, just one. Hers, lol, controlled. But I heard it, the panic under her words. Lol. I woke up and you were gone. I don't know if this is how you're choosing to handle it, but it's not fair. If you're trying to punish me, just say it. Just talk to me. We can still work something out. Okay? Please. The woman who sat across from me hours earlier, handing me ultimatums like they were coupons, was now pleading through a voicemail I didn't ask for. And all I had done was leave. That's when it hit me. People like Darla don't fear consequences. They fear silence. They fear not being in control of the narrative. Not getting to spin it, fix it, wrap it in poetic closure. Me walking out without a sound. That wasn't part of her story. She expected me to rage, to break something, to cry, to beg. She had prepared her arguments, her defense, her fake tears. But I gave her nothing. And in doing so, I gave her everything she didn't know how to face herself. The man she betrayed didn't scream. He vanished. And that somehow scared her more than any fight could have. That night, I sat at the small table in my motel room, flash drive in hand, staring out the window into nothing. I still didn't know what I was going to do, but for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting on her to decide for me. By the time night fell, I'd gone through every voicemail, every message, every email. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand how fast the cracks were spreading. Darla had clearly expected me to explode, to lash out, to feed her a narrative where she could play victim to the world and whisper about how I couldn't handle the truth. But now she was scrambling because silence doesn't come with a script. And without a script, she was just another liar caught mid-performance. There was a strange, eerie satisfaction in hearing her lose control. Not shouting, but stumbling. The second voicemail she left was almost laughable if it hadn't been so pathetic. Lel, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Can we just meet and talk? Please? You're scaring me. She thought I was the one falling apart. What she didn't understand, what she probably never could, is that I'd been falling apart for a long time. And this wasn't the collapse. This was the clearing. She was just finally watching the debris hit the floor. I still remember the third message. That one. That one stopped me cold. It wasn't from her. It was from my brother. Hey Lel man, listen. I don't know how much you know. I swear I didn't want to be part of it. Not like this. But she told me you knew something. Just call me back, please. Before things get worse. Before things get worse. That phrase stuck in my head like a broken note in a song you can't stop humming. What worse did he mean? What had already happened that I didn't know? I stared at my phone for hours, debating whether to call him. My brother Kellen had always been the golden boy, more charming, more ambitious, more everything. And yet, he never could finish anything. Not college, not a relationship, not even his lease renewals. He floated. He was the kind of person people forgave too easily. And now he was mixed up in this. I didn't call him. Instead, I opened my laptop, connected to the motel Wi-Fi, and did what I should have done months ago. I opened her photo archive. Darla always stored her sessions on a cloud drive labeled by date and client. But buried between folders named Benson Family Beach Session and Sarah Maternity Shoot was a folder labeled Simply Reflections. Inside, over 200 photographs, all black and white, all candid, all of them that same man from the video, the one who called her Dar. I clicked through image after image. Some were from parks, others in diners, hotel lobbies, parking garages, their hands touching, her head on his shoulder, his hand on her lower back. He wasn't just a fling. He was a chapter she'd been writing for months, maybe longer. Then I saw one that made my breath hitch. It was taken from our own backyard. The photo was blurry, clearly rushed, taken through the slats of the fence, but it was unmistakable. Him and her kissing right outside our house, my house, our home. And in the bottom left corner of the frame, the edge of my chair, the one I always sat in after work, which meant this wasn't just a betrayal. It was done in full view of my life, of my place in it, of my routine. While I was likely inside making dinner, wondering if I'd done something wrong because she was being cold again. Suddenly, I didn't just feel heartbroken. I felt humiliated. She wasn't trying to hide it. Not really. She was daring me to notice. And when I didn't, when I continued playing the loyal, quiet husband, she grew bold enough to leave evidence in plain sight. A toothbrush, a photograph, a folder of confessions with artistic lighting. I stood up from the table so fast the chair slammed backward. My breathing felt shallow. My fingers were tingling. I walked over to the bathroom sink, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at the stranger in the mirror. Not her, not him, me. I'd let this happen. I'd excused the coldness, the gaslighting, the lies. I told myself she was just tired, that things were just in a rough patch. I thought love meant patience, that loyalty was measured by how much pain you could carry before breaking. But the truth, loyalty without limits isn't love. The self-erasure. And I was done erasing myself. I returned to the table and opened one last file, a document titled Future. It was a travel itinerary. 3 months from now, flights booked, Airbnbs reserved. 2 names again, hers and his, but not for Oregon this time. For Greece. The same trip she and I once dreamed about on our 2nd anniversary when we stayed up all night Googling islands and bookmarking tours. She had just repurposed the whole thing. Taken our dream and pasted another man into it like I was a bad draft. That's when it all snapped into place. This wasn't an affair. This was a replacement. She was already living a version of her life where I didn't exist. And the ultimatum, that was just her attempt at control. She wanted me to make it official, to be the one who walked so she could pretend she tried. But I wouldn't give her that story because now I was the one writing the ending and she had no idea what it would look like. The invitation came 2 days later, slipped beneath the door of the inn like a wedding. Save the date. Neat handwriting, perfectly centered. My name spelled out like nothing had happened. Dinner. Our place. Just talk, please. D. I stared at the card for longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I was trying to figure out what she thought this was. Redemption, negotiation, closure. Darla had always curated her moments like photo shoots, timed lighting, selective angles, planned expressions. And now she was trying to stage this dinner like the perfect shot, a chance to soften the edges of her betrayal. But I wasn't walking in as the man she remembered. That man had left the moment he realized his marriage had been turned into a prop for someone else's fantasy. Still, I went not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to stand in the ruins and know that I'd never rebuild on that ground again. When I arrived, the house looked the same. That's what shocked me the most. You expect betrayal to change the color of the walls, to shift the furniture, to leave blood on the floor, but everything was just as I had left it. Even the porch light was on, humming like nothing had shattered. She opened the door before I could knock. "Lel," she said with a faint smile. "You came." I didn't respond. I walked past her without making eye contact and sat in the dining room. She followed me in silence, placing 2 wine glasses on the table like this was a date, like we hadn't both been living in 2 entirely different realities. She poured. "I didn't drink. I just want to talk," she said, taking her seat across from me. "I think we owe each other that." "You mean I owe you that?" I replied quietly. She flinched, but only for a second. She still had her mask on. I could see her trying to hold it in place. "I know I hurt you," she began, her voice shifting into something softer, more calculated. "I didn't plan for this, but it's real, and I'm not going to apologize for following something that made me feel alive again." I waited a beat, then looked directly at her. "So, was the toothbrush his or your brother's?" That was the moment the mask cracked just slightly. Her pupils narrowed and her lips parted as if searching for a line she hadn't rehearsed. It wasn't like that," she stammered. "It was exactly like that," I said. "I saw the photos. The ones you thought you hid well. You went into my cloud account. You left the door open. I just walked through it." For the first time, she looked embarrassed. Not because she was caught, but because she'd underestimated me. Darla always saw me as the safe one, the quiet one, the backup plan. But backup plans don't stay quiet when the fire starts on purpose. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I'm not here to beg you to come back. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to return your narrative to you because I'm done playing a role in it." She reached for her wine. Her hand trembled. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose everything." "Then you shouldn't have handed me an ultimatum," I said. "Because the second you did, you stopped being afraid of losing me and started betting on my weakness." She didn't answer. She just looked at me like I'd morphed into someone she didn't recognize. Maybe I had. There was a silence between us, long and sharp. It wasn't the kind of silence you fill with small talk. It was the kind that divides timelines. Before and after, us and not us. I stood up. "I'm leaving," I said. "For good this time. And I'm not leaving you with a speech or a scene or a chance to rewrite this." "You're just walking out?" she asked, her voice cracking for the first time. "No," I said. "You walked out. I just finally realized the door was open." As I moved toward the hallway, she called after me this time. Not as Darla the photographer or Darla the strategist, but Darla, the woman who realized too late that silence wasn't surrender. "LOL, wait. Please, you don't have to do this." I turned back, one hand on the door frame. "You did this. I'm just giving you what you asked for." And with that, I walked out of the house we'd built, out of the life she hollowed out, and out of the story she'd been scripting without my consent. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't power. It was something far simpler. It was freedom. I hadn't planned on going back. I meant what I said when I walked out. But some endings write themselves differently than you expect. And this one still had a chapter left open when I hadn't even realized I was the author of. 3 days after the dinner, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I don't answer those, especially not anymore. But something made me pick up. "Is this Lel?" His voice was unsteady. Too low. He sounded younger than I remembered. But then again, people always sound smaller when their confidence is bleeding. "This is Silas," he said. I didn't speak. I just let the name settle in the air like smoke. Silas, him, the man from the video, from the photos, from my backyard. The one who had taken something from me without asking and never expected I'd look him in the eye again. "I know we've never talked," he continued. "Nervous now, but I need to. It's about Darla." I leaned back in my motel chair, staring at the ceiling. The plaster was cracked in the corner, the kind of detail you ignore when you're trying to rebuild your life from rubble. But now it felt symbolic, all of it. "Why are you calling me?" I finally asked, my voice even. "I came to see her," he said. "She didn't answer. She's not home." But someone else was. Now I sat up. "Who?" He hesitated. "Your brother." A beat passed before I spoke. "What do you mean?" He was already there. When I got to the house, they were fighting badly. I didn't go in. I just stood outside. But I heard enough. She was screaming something about using her and exposing everything. Then she threw something at the wall. It sounded like glass. I didn't know what disturbed me more. The fact that Silas was calling me like we were somehow allies, or the image of my brother and my wife in a house that no longer felt like either of theirs, fighting over a mess they created together. "What do you want from me, Silas?" He took a breath. "She told me she'd left you clean, that you were gone. But now she's unraveling. I didn't sign up for that." I don't want any part of whatever this is turning into. I just wanted to stop. That made me laugh, and not in a way that felt good. A dry, brittle sound I didn't recognize as my own. You think calling me will make it stop? I thought you'd want to know the truth. The truth, I repeated. Now there's a word people like you love to use after it's useless. I hung up. I should have left it there. I should have turned the phone off, closed the curtains, and gone back to pretending none of it mattered. But something kept pulling me back. Not to Darla, not to Silas, but to Kellen, my brother. The one person I trusted without caution. The one person who knew how much I worshipped the idea of loyalty because he used to preach it louder than anyone else. And now he was standing in the ruins of my marriage, arguing with the woman who set fire to it. I couldn't ignore that. So I drove back to the house, not to talk, not to fight, just to see. When I pulled up, the street was quiet. Her car was gone. Kellen's truck was parked half up on the curb like he'd arrived in a panic. And the front door was half open. I stepped out slowly, not sure what I was walking into. Inside, the living room looked like a museum of bad decisions. A shattered vase on the floor, papers scattered across the table, a wine stain bleeding into the rug she once cried over. And in the middle of it, my brother pacing like a man trapped in a maze he built himself. He looked up and froze when he saw me. LOL, he started. But the rest caught in his throat. I stood in the doorway, hands in my jacket pockets, not moving an inch. How long? I asked. He closed his eyes, exhaled hard. 5 months, maybe 6. That was longer than I expected. Long enough for birthdays, holidays, long drives, and shared secrets I would never get back. He ran his hand through his hair, something he only did when he felt like a cornered child. It didn't start the way you think, he said quickly. She came to me after your first separation. She said things were already done between you. Stop. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried more weight than I'd ever used with him. Don't explain it. Don't clean it up. You knew. He nodded slowly, shame finally crawling across his face. She's not okay, he said. That's why I came. She said she's being watched. That someone hacked her accounts. That you're planning something. I almost laughed again, but this time it was sadder than before. She's not being watched, I said. She's being remembered. And she doesn't know what that feels like because she only knows how to erase people. Kellen looked at me like he wanted to apologize, but I didn't want his apology. I didn't want anything from him anymore. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. You both played your parts, but you never stopped to ask who was holding the camera. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm not done. And I walked out before he could ask the question that would haunt them both because I didn't need to confront her anymore. She would do that all on her own. The thing about lies is they rot slowly. They don't explode overnight. They whisper their way through your walls, slip into your routines, and hollow out everything that once felt solid until you knock on what used to be your life and realize it's just an echo chamber. I didn't want revenge. That was never the plan. But when you've spent months being played like background music in someone else's story, there comes a moment when you decide to raise the volume on your own silence. Not to destroy, but to make sure they can finally hear what they've ignored. So I did what Darla would never expect. I told the truth. I didn't tell it to her face. I didn't storm in with evidence or public drama. That's not my style. She would have known how to deflect that. She was trained in performance. She could cry on cue, spin guilt like thread. No, she needed something more dangerous than confrontation. She needed the light of day. I started with her photography community, a tight-knit circle of creatives that often blurred the line between friend and business partner. Darla had curated a persona among them. Visionary, fiercely loyal, authentic. She built clients off referrals, grew through word of mouth, always with that same tagline on her website, I only shoot what's real. So, I gathered what was real, not the video that would have been crossing a line I still refused to touch. But the folder, the one labeled Reflections, held more than just images. It had geotags, timestamps, metadata, photos of Silas taken in hotel rooms days before she claimed to be with her sick mother, photos of him wearing the scarf she said she'd bought for my birthday. One picture had a coffee cup with my name on it still in her hand while he kissed her cheek. She wasn't just careless. She was proud. With every shutter click, she immortalized her betrayal like it was art. So I made it art too. I created a private, invite-only gallery online. Password protected, simple, clean, titled Fractures. Inside, only 12 images, no captions, no names, just context, unedited, raw. And I sent the link to 3 people, her closest business collaborators. Not with malice, not with threats, just one sentence in the email. The truth behind what you showcase matters. I expected backlash or silence. Instead, I got confusion, then concern, and then exactly what I thought would happen, whispers. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, one of her longtime clients canceled an upcoming shoot. A second emailed asking if she needed time to sort out personal matters. A third posted cryptic messages on social media about ethical boundaries in art. Darla didn't text me. She didn't call, but I knew she knew. She vanished from her online pages, disabled comments, removed 2 photo collections from her website. And then I received an email. Not a message, not a call, just a sterile, perfectly formatted email. Subject line: "You've made your point." She went on about how I'd sabotaged her business, how I'd misrepresented her work, how private pain should never be weaponized. She never mentioned Silas, never mentioned my brother. She kept it clinical, like a cease and desist, disguised as grief. But buried between her lines was something she didn't intend to show. Fear, not of me, of exposure, of no longer being able to hide behind her own narrative. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to my lawyer, not to file anything, not yet, but to clarify where the lines were drawn, what belonged to who, and whether anything in that house was still mine. Turns out she had never moved forward with the separation paperwork. The agreement she handed me at the start, it was just a template, unfiled, undated, which meant legally I still had access, still had a claim, still had presence. So I did something bold. I returned not for a fight, for the keys. When I arrived at the house, she was already waiting on the porch. No mascara, no jewelry, just sweatpants and a blank stare. "You're not staying," she said flatly. "No," I agreed. "Just collecting. You've done enough damage." I looked past her into the doorway. The place was emptier than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like even the furniture was tired of pretending to belong here. "You broke it," I said. "I'm just refusing to pretend it wasn't already in pieces." She crossed her arms, her voice sharpening. "This isn't how you get closure." "You're right," I replied. "Closure isn't something you hand me like a document in a folder. It's something I make for myself, and I've made it." I walked inside, grabbed only a few things. A coat, an old camera that belonged to my father, a photo of my late dog that she always hated, but I never had the courage to hang. As I turned to leave, she asked the one question she had been holding back for weeks. "Was I ever enough for you?" I paused in the doorway, hand resting on the frame. "You were," I said, "until you decided not to be, and then I left." This time, not just the house, but the version of myself that waited for permission to live again. It was past midnight when the email arrived. I hadn't been sleeping, not because I couldn't, but because lately sleep felt like a reward I hadn't earned. I'd been lying on a scratchy motel bed with the TV on mute, watching some rerun about people who fix things for a living. That irony didn't go unnoticed. I was living in the wreckage of a life that couldn't be patched back together with glue or hope. Her name lit up my screen again. No subject, no preview text, just Darla Robbins. Even now, she used my last name like it still meant something. I told myself not to open it, but I did. The message was short, for sentences. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to see what you never saw. I'm sorry. I couldn't be better. The file is attached." Below was a video. No title, no timestamp, just a cryptic file name. "Before you left." I stared at it for several minutes, debating. I knew it could be bait, her last attempt to control the narrative, to draw me into one final performance. But there was a part of me, stupid or curious or both, that still wanted to understand why, not what she did, but why. So I played it. The video was shot in our bedroom, clearly on a phone, propped up somewhere between the bookshelf and the mirror. Darla was sitting on the edge of the bed in silence. No makeup, her eyes red like she'd been crying. But there were no tears now, just that haunting stillness I'd come to associate with her lies, like she'd been waiting for someone to say, "Action." Then she spoke. "When we met, you made me feel like I was someone worth rooting for," she began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. And I hated that more than I understood. I blinked, confused. I know that doesn't make sense, but when someone loves you unconditionally, completely, you start to feel like you owe them a version of yourself that doesn't exist. And I didn't know how to be that for you. I didn't know how to live in something that wasn't on the edge of destruction. So, I built the destruction myself. She shifted on the bed, looked down at her hands. I cheated because I wanted control, not just of the relationship, of my identity. I wanted to be wanted without being watched. I wanted passion without responsibility. And I thought Silas gave me that. I thought it was freedom, but it was just another version of me trying to disappear. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just distance. Like I was watching someone else's confessional. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "But I hated who I became around you because you reminded me of everything I wasn't. You were kind, patient, present, and I didn't know how to sit with that. So, I did what I've always done when I get scared. I ran." She reached forward, turned off the camera, and the screen went black. That was it. No begging, no justifications, just a raw, twisted apology wrapped in self-hatred and too late reflections. I stared at the screen long after it ended. Not because I believed her, but because in some strange way I realized I no longer needed to. That night I packed my bag for real. Not just to flee, but to move out of that motel, out of the town, out of the orbit of people who only remembered who I used to be. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I sold the car, booked a one-way train west, somewhere with no history attached. Somewhere I wouldn't be the guy who got left or the guy who walked out or the guy whose wife tore the seams of his life. Before I left, I made one stop, my lawyer's office. I handed him the finalized documents, divorce paperwork I had rewritten on my own terms. No negotiations, no shared property, no lingering contact, just clean, signed freedom. "Send it to her," I said. "No letter, no message, just let the paper speak." He nodded, not asking questions. Lawyers never do. That evening, I boarded the train just as the sun was setting. The kind of sunset that felt like it had nothing to do with me, and that made it perfect. I sat by the window, placed my phone in airplane mode, and stared out as everything I used to be blurred into the distance. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just existed quietly, and sometimes that's enough. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was that this story wasn't quite finished. Not yet, because just before the train crossed the state line, my phone buzzed, even on airplane mode. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. 3 words. "He knows everything." The text sat on my lock screen like a spark in a field of dry grass. He knows everything. No name, no context, just those 3 words glowing on my phone as the train hummed westward through an unfamiliar stretch of America. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After all, I had finally chosen silence. I had finally started walking away, but something about that message pulled at me, not with fear, with clarity. I switched my phone out of airplane mode. A dozen notifications came in, mostly junk, but one voicemail sat at the top from a number I didn't recognize. I hit play and held the phone to my ear, the rumble of the tracks underneath me like a heartbeat. "Lel, it's Silas. I wasn't gonna reach out again, but you need to know. Kellen called me. He told me everything, not just about Darla, about how she used both of us, about the money, about the manipulation, about how she kept us apart by convincing each of us that the other was the real threat. He found out about the gallery, about your quiet exit. And he said something I think you need to hear. Lel deserved better than all of us. He's sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I thought maybe it would matter to you." I sat back, stunned, not because I needed his apology, but because for once, the truth hadn't come from Darla. It had come from the chaos she left behind. from the pieces that started turning on themselves once I'd removed my presence. It wasn't justice. It wasn't revenge. It was acknowledgement, and oddly it felt like peace. I looked out the train window, the sky now completely dark, the stars just beginning to appear. Somewhere between where I left and where I was going, the past had stopped chasing me. I spent the next few weeks settling into a quiet mountain town in Colorado. Small, cool air, people who didn't ask too many questions. I took a job at a community arts center, teaching teens how to use old cameras and edit photos in black and white. Funny, right? Teaching people how to find truth through a lens, the very thing Darla had distorted. Every morning I walked to the same coffee shop. The barista, a woman named June with tired eyes and a silver streak in her hair, never asked why I always ordered decaf and sat alone. Eventually, she started sliding a blueberry muffin across the counter with a smile. No words needed. She never tried to fill the silence. She just shared it with me, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't rebuilding the same life I had. I was building something quieter, simpler, but stronger. And one day, months later, I got a small white envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was me sitting at the coffee shop window, hands around the mug, staring out at the morning snow. The back of the photo read in handwriting I didn't recognize. "You still look like someone worth rooting for." There was no signature, but for the first time I didn't need to know who it came from because I finally knew who I was, and I was